Good day, fellow champions of inclusion. I am AA Ron, and this is the Inclusive Dad podcast, where we explore inclusion and make it practical. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to join me in exploring ways we can create a more inclusive world together. You are important, you matter, and you can make a difference. Today, my guest is Debra Erickson. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Why don't you just start us off by just telling me a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I am blind. I live in Portland, Oregon, and I own a business called The Blind Kitchen. And I was the only blind student in culinary school. So it was a bit of a ride, as you can imagine.
Yeah. Were you? When did you lose your sight?
I was formally diagnosed at 28 years old. So I was driving and had children and everything at that point. I have
Okay.
retinitis pigmentosa, but there's no history on either side of my family.
Okay.
So it was recessive genes. My parents happened to get together. And but when we went back through the records, I always wore glasses for astigmatism as a kid. And when we went back to our country doctor's records, there were in the notes it said Deborah has signs of reduced peripheral vision, and I was 17 years old at the time, but it
Okay.
never got followed up on. So it started in adolescence, but I wasn't formally diagnosed till 28.
Okay. So you grew up. So when you were going to school, you didn't have any. I mean, you weren't on like an IEP or had any accommodations because of your vision at that time, since you're
Nothing at
passing
all.
away. Okay,
We were clueless.
gotcha.
We just thought I was clumsy.
Yeah, that's okay. That happens. And I know you're from. You currently live in Oregon. Have you lived in Oregon your whole life, or
No, I grew up in Indiana and then I lived in California for 17 years and now I've been in Oregon for almost 20 years.
awesome? My first question I usually ask is, what is your definition of inclusion?
My definition of inclusion means that people see you for who you are as a human and not as a blind human, that your whatever disability that you have, whether it's hidden or seen, becomes secondary to your humanness, and that's hard to do in our society. People tend to notice the disability first, and then if you're lucky, then they try to get to know you. But
Right.
I think inclusion is recognizing the humanness in you before the disability.
Yeah. That's a. I love that definition. So did you have any? So for me, kind of my story is I don't ever recall like the word disability, knowing anybody with a disability, anything prior to my daughter being born, and she's 22. Growing up, did you have any experience with disability?
You know, it's funny you mentioned that. I know your daughter has cerebral palsy, and
Yeah.
I went to school with a girl that had cerebral palsy,
Okay.
and I'm still in touch with her today. But that pretty much was the only thing. I didn't know any blind people. I
Sure.
didn't know anybody in wheelchairs. It just, yeah, disabilities, they're definitely not although they're becoming as our population ages, there are
Yep.
more people are becoming labeled with the word disabled, and a lot more legal blindness too with the aging population of the baby boomers. So it's an
Yeah.
interesting phenomena.
Yeah. I've come over some statistics. I mean, I don't. I mean, you kind of see different ones, but I think like a quarter of the population has what be class could be classified as a disability, and then if you um, look at people living to what the normal life expectancy is, it's quite. I mean, it goes up even more than that. Like most people are going to have at least a temporary or short-term disability sometime in their lifetime. It's just something we don't really talk about as much. So it's you don't hear it a lot, but it's most people. There's a pretty good chance you're going to have at least a short-term disability in your lifetime.
Yeah, and a lot of us don't notice it till it knocks on our door,
Right.
and then like, well, this is important. Why don't they
Yeah.
have ramps? Why don't they
Yeah.
have? Yeah,
Sure.
but you don't think about it if it's not in your front yard.
No. Do you want to talk a little bit about like what was it like when you kind of, I mean, later in life you lost your vision? I mean, what was that like for you being having been able to like see prior to that, and then finding out you were losing your vision and then having to kind of live with it?
Yeah, it was absolutely a shock. I was absolutely not expecting the diagnosis. I was still driving. I
Mm-hmm.
went to get glasses for goodness sakes, and then they referred me to an ophthalmologist. And
Sure.
so I spent many years trying not to be blind, pretending I wasn't, not going back to eye doctors because I was told. I went to one support group after I was diagnosed, and there were people there with canes and dogs, guide dogs.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like,
Yeah.
man, I am in the wrong place. This is not me. And the guy sitting next to me says, hey, were you diagnosed by an ophthalmologist? And I said, yeah. He said, well, they're going to write to the DMV and take your license. So I quit going back. I never went again. I couldn't wait to get out of there. So I spent a lot of, I don't want to say wasted. You can't be where you're not, but I
Yeah.
did not want to be identified. I didn't want to carry a cane. So I looked very clumsy, and people would um, assume, like my husband and I went to a restaurant one time, and somehow I need to go to the restroom, I think, and I'm like groping my way through because it's night blindness is a early sign of
Okay.
this as well. And when I came back, we tried to order a glass of wine. I was dressed nicely. I worked at a hospital. She said, I'm
Mm-hmm.
not serving her. So
Right.
people, when you're clumsy or if you're acting in a strange way, people make up stories as to if you don't give them the information. If I'd been carrying a cane, there wouldn't even been, she would have said, oh, she can't see. That would
Right.
have been, she's having problems seeing. So don't want to say it was wasted time, but I really wish it was inevitable. I was hoping it wasn't. And
Right.
so I tried to fake it as best I could until I no longer could. It was just
Yeah.
it wasn't safe for me anymore.
Yeah. So where were you working then when you lost your vision? And did you have to find like a new career then after that, or how did that go?
No, I spent it. I was working at the Veterans Administration, the
Okay.
hospital, as a recreation therapist in Palo Alto, California. But I did have to quit driving. I almost hit a boy one time. I was being very careful because I knew I didn't have peripheral vision, and I was
Mm-hmm.
pulling out to take a left onto a busier street than I was on, cross street. And so I looked to the left, to the right, to the left. No cars were coming, and I accelerated on the gas, and a little boy had been coming down the sidewalk on a bike. I wasn't looking on
Mm-hmm.
the sidewalk. I was looking for cars, and I just parked the car. It said, I can't do this. He fell over, but he jumped. I stopped the car. I didn't hit him hard, but it enough to knock him off his bike, and he jumped up and got back on his bike and rode. He was terrified. And
Yeah.
so I got lucky that I did not kill another human being or injure another human being. And so I just said, this is it. And that was the beginning of, okay, I got to do something different. This isn't working anymore.
Yeah. So where did you go? Where did you end up working after that then?
So after I moved, so then after the VA, I moved to Oregon, and
Okay.
I ended up working at a different hospital, Oregon Health and Science University. It's a medical school, wonderful organization. But I ended up getting laid off there after working there for about 6 years, and I ended up going to, not immediately, but I ended up going to the Oregon Commission for the Blind and getting my blind skills, learning Braille, orientation, mobility, all the meal prep, which is where
Sure.
the light bulb went on that maybe I could teach this. I would love
Yeah.
to teach this. And but then I knew I didn't know how to cook. I didn't know how to teach. And my youngest son is 6'5", so I did some feeding of him right for sure.
Yeah.
But I cooked from packages like Hamburger Helper and
Right.
Manwich and macaroni and cheese. That's my mother cooked for us, but she had 7 daughters. There was no way we could get alone time in front of the stove. So my
Yeah.
way of helping her to cook was peeling 10 pounds of potatoes for dinner. And I hated it anyway. I wanted to be outside. So so I ended up going to culinary school, and they were fabulous. And I learned so much, and I learned that I really had a passion for cooking because now I am a good cook. I wasn't
Yeah.
before, but now I am. And I love the science of it. I love the history of it, and I love the art of it and the challenge of it. And so that's what started me to do the blind kitchen. Was I couldn't do things the same way the other students did it. I
Right.
had to find other ways and other tools, and that's how it ended up coming to be. I thought other people could probably use these strategies that I figured out, and that's what I do now.
Yeah. So that's awesome. When you were in culinary school, you said you were the only blind student.
Yeah, the only one blind student they've ever had. There was I was in the cuisine part of the program. There's two roads you can take:
Okay.
cuisine or baking and pastry.
Okay.
And they had a deaf student in the baking and pastry who had an interpreter for
Sure.
them in there. But we were the first ones they'd ever had on either side.
So when you decided to go to the culinary school, and I mean, how did they react to you when they found out you were blind and you wanted to go to the school and learn how to learn their program?
Yeah, well, Disabled Student Services is where I went first, and they were fabulous. I went to McClaskey Culinary Institute at Clark College in Vancouver, Washington, which is just across the Columbia River from where I live. And they really helped to get me set up, make sure I had everything I needed in Braille, pen friends. There are so many different kinds of tools. So they helped me identify what I would need to the best of their ability, because none of them had gone to culinary school. So they were
Yeah.
doing their educated guesses, and the chefs could not have been better. In fact, one of the instructors actually found out there was a blind woman in Beaverton, Oregon, that had a vegan cafe, only in Oregon.
Okay.
And so a vegan bakery, and he actually made an appointment with her and interviewed her for about an hour and took a tour, because he didn't know if his blind student was going to be male, female, older,
Right.
younger. He
Yeah.
just knew, he just wanted to make it a better experience. And I'm still in touch with him to this day as well. He's
Yeah.
a fabulous man. So it just was, it was hard socially, very hard socially, because if you want to meet someone, you make eye contact with them,
Right.
or you find something in common. And I didn't have the whole kitchen was strange to me, the whole thing. So it took me a while to socially get in with the other kids, who were much younger, by the way,
Yeah.
than I was.
Yeah.
I was no spring chicken when I went back. And so it took a couple of months, but then they finally invited me to lunch with them, and realized that they couldn't catch blindness. It's not,
Right.
and that I was a normal person with a sense of humor, and that's, I ended up fitting in just fine. But it took a while for them to not be afraid of me or afraid of hurting me or
Right.
whatever it is, the fears we put on disabled people.
Yeah. What is the most important culinary tool that you use?
Probably the most important one, though there's two, it'd be the talking thermometer, so that I don't make my friends and family sick by undercooking the meat. Because most recipes will say run
Right.
it, cook
Yep.
it till the juices run clear, or
Yep.
it's no longer pink. I don't have that information, but I have a thermometer I can insert in the
Sure.
thickest part of the meat, closest to the bone, and there's a way of doing that too. Well, even if it's hot, and to get the temperature. And the other is a work tray, which is basically a standard cafeteria tray, but a little bit larger. And
Okay.
so I never do anything without a work tray. So if something happens to spill, I'm very careful. But even when I could see, I would spill things.
Right.
Instead of it running across the counter, down the front of my cupboards, onto the floor, it now, most of the time, if something spills, it, wet or dry,
Yeah.
it gets contained within that tray. And they're clean. I mean, they're indestructible. Those I really can't work without.
Yeah. How do you? Oh, my brain's like, how do you put a meat thermometer into a piece of meat like that's on this in a pan without like burning your hands?
Yeah, good question. So we have another tool that's called a
Okay.
cut glove, and it's meant to protect your hands against cutting. You can't cut
Okay.
through it with a knife. Relatively thin, stretchy. It's got 4 fingers and a thumb, and so that also is a layer of protection against heat. It's not meant to be. It's meant to be against blades, but still, it's not my skin touching that hot turkey or that roasted
Right.
chicken.
Yep.
So then I can touch it for just a second with my left hand, and then find out where the breast is, or where the
Sure.
thigh is. And then it's not perfect, but it's an educated guess as to where
Right.
the thickest part is. And if I temp it, close to the place where I think it is 3 or 4 times, and I'm getting a temperature of more than 165, I can be confident that I'm at the
Yeah.
right temperature, or I put it back in the oven for 5 more minutes, see if it'll come up.
Right. Wow, that's interesting. My brain's that my so I mean I'm not a good cook at all. Like I'm not a good cook. But I mean just thinking about if I mean today I have usually one time a week I'll put throw a steak in the air fryer and cook or scramble up some eggs, and we have steak and eggs in the morning. Just I mean those ingredients I mean you can figure out whether eggs in the fridge by feeling the container, but like how do you figure out like what is like soy sauce versus Worcestershire sauce, or I mean other things that don't have like Braille on them, or any way for you to tell what they are.
Yeah, it's all about labeling, and there are amazing technology things that have come out. So there's this system called Way Around, and it's a RN radio frequency identification.
Okay.
Little tag you put on a rubber band, put it on the bottle,
Oh, okay.
label it using your cell phone. I just say soy sauce, and then every time I come back, when I open up that app, I go to the labels and to the one I find that's soy sauce.
Awesome.
It could be as simple as also like a rubber band on, like let's say I have a can of cream of mushroom soup and a can of cream of chicken.
Sure.
And you can't tell the difference. You can't smell it. They're the same weight. When I come home from the grocery store, when I can use my phone, AI is amazing. The different apps and stuff that they have, and the glasses. I've got a Ray-Ban MetaVision glasses that can have cameras on them. But if I know for sure that the one in my left hand is cream of mushroom, I'll put a rubber band on it. And that way, when I go back in 6 months, cream has the letter R in it, but mushroom has an R in it, chicken doesn't. So I know.
Yeah, there you go.
Rubber band. So it's a lot of ways of just assigning meaning. They have things called bump dots. I put one bump dot on my garlic powder and 2 bump dots on the lid of my onion powder. So I just have it's just a touch of my fingers, and I know which is which for the most commonly used ones.
Yeah, so you've had to come up with ways to. Yeah, that's interesting. That makes sense. I mean, plus, I guess like a can of soup, you can't, or a can of something, you can't tell the difference. But if it's certain bottles, I suppose you learn that this bottle is based on how it feels. This is the only shape for this type of thing or whatever. But yeah, that's interesting.
No, you're right. When I find a uniquely shaped bottle, even if I'm done with the contents, I assign a new thing to it so that I don't throw those away. I reuse those.
Yeah, that's interesting.
The other place that's very difficult is in the freezer. If I have a pound of ground chicken and a pound of ground meat, I can't smell it. There's no tactile information, and my Braille is so slow. My fingers are numb before I can read it. It's so cold. So I use that Way Around system and just wrap a rubber band with a tag on it, and it works in the freezer. You put them in your clothing, run them through the dryer. It's crazy.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So how do you buy groceries? Do you go to the grocery store, or do you do it all online, or how do you?
I do it online for the most part. My computer has special software and my phone does as well. If you have an iPhone, it's built-in accessibility. And it's called a screen reader. So it reads the information that's going on the screen to me, and that can be, amazing. It also can be very frustrating because if you're on a website that has a bunch of pop-up ads, it takes the focus of the virtual cursor, and then you don't know where you're at anymore. Or it may just say button, 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 and I don't know what that button is. Thank you for this opportunity to accessible programming is not that hard to do for the computer, for people's websites, and it makes a huge difference for people like me. But there's also another service. I cannot run my business without it. It's called IRA, and it's a visual interpretation service. And they can literally, I pay for it, but they can literally remote into my computer. When I call them on the phone, there's an app you download and you sign up, and they can remote into my computer and take control of it and actually fill out. I had someone helping me do a 1099 yesterday because the form was inaccessible to me. And so I couldn't, it would be very difficult. My husband still carries a flip phone, so you can tell how much help he's on the computer. So it's all good, but.
What did you say that service is called?
That's called IRA, AIRA. Now that one, you get 5 minutes a day for free, but there's another one called Be My Eyes, and it's also a wonderful service that's run by volunteers. So you download the app, it's all free, but they can't remote into your computer or anything like that. They're just strangers, and you don't want to do financial stuff. They're not bonded, but they're all volunteers, and they're wonderful, and they do their best to look through your camera phone and tell you where to aim your phone so that they can see the information you're asking for. Yeah, that's fabulous. Great. Yeah.
I've interviewed a couple other, or at least one other person who's been blind for my podcast, and they talked about some kind of a service for, like, if you're going to be on a Zoom call where you can have some people will help you make sure you're set up so that you're in the camera and everything's set up correctly. So
I'm sure that's IRA. I'm
Okay.
guessing that's Ira.
That's probably, yeah, that makes sense. That's really cool though. I hadn't thought of it. I'm like, oh, that's a great idea.
Yeah, yeah. No, it is. I hadn't thought of it, but
Yeah,
I use it all the time.
yeah. How can a blind person organize their kitchen and pantry?
Good question. So it's all about organization. There's a couple of things that I use, like Lazy Susan, the little platforms that revolve around. You see them in restaurants.
Yep.
They have them that are only 10 inches, and you can put them in your cupboard. Because when I when I need something out of my cupboard, it is going to be in the back every time, even if I used it
Yep.
last.
Yep.
And then I'm going to knock things over as I reach to try and find it, the thing with the one bump dot, and then I'm going to knock things out over when I try to pull my hand out of the cupboard with it. So with the Lazy Susan, it's just as easy as turning it very gently. Then anything in the back is now in the front.
Yep.
So stuff like that. I use bins to put like things in, like bottles of like my hoisin sauce, oyster sauce, soy sauce, Szechuan pepper oil, things
Mhm.
that have to do with my Asian rice wine vinegar. I have them all in one bin. And that way, I know if I have 100 bottles, there's 6 of them in that bin. Now I've narrowed it from 100 possibilities to
Yep.
6. So
Mhm.
that's the way I do it, and then label them in a way that has meaning to me. Because my husband can see, so he does, but he doesn't cook. He wouldn't know soy sauce if it
Right.
came up and bit him. But he doesn't interfere, and that's also important. That people, if something gets moved around, it's just gone for me.
Right.
My spices were especially a challenge because I didn't want to have to open every jar every time to smell it and try
Right.
and guess,
Yep.
because some of them smell quite alike. So there's a tool out there called a pen friend, and it comes with stickers, and it's just a plastic pen. It's not high tech at all, but it's another RFID, but instead of it working through a robotic voice, it actually, I touch the pen to the sticker that's on the spice jar. So let's say it's nutmeg,
Mhm.
and then I record. I say nutmeg to the pen, and then
Mhm.
touch the sticker. And every time I touch that pen to that sticker, it'll say nutmeg in my own voice, or
Hmm.
cinnamon, or
Interesting.
turmeric, or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it doesn't take up much
Wow.
space, and it's very quick. Runs on batteries. It's a really nice tool.
Wow. Like, I mean, I'm not sure if you know the answer to this question, but like 10 years ago or before all this technology, like, can you, I mean, what was, like, how would somebody do it before all this, I mean,
Yeah.
technology? I guess come up with your system of rubber bands or some other item that they had to figure out ways to label them, I guess, huh?
Yep, you're exactly right. It would have to, or get somebody to help you, which is
Right.
incredibly demoralizing as an independent adult, that I have to get somebody to come help me. And I actually
Yeah.
had a problem with that yesterday. We were trying to mail a package to Germany, and the customs forms. I don't know if you've ever filled one of those out.
No.
They are like 100 years old. They are tiny, the little things, and
Yeah.
they were like, well, we want you to itemize it. And I can't do it. And Ira can't help me because I have to do the writing. It's a physical form.
Okay.
I'm
Yep.
shipping free matter for the blind, so I can't they don't have a free matter for the blind version online. So I can't use online unless I'm paying for it. And that would cost, an arm and a leg.
Yep.
And so, there are still tasks as an adult, a competent entrepreneur and chef,
Yep.
I can't do, and my husband can't do it either. He's, it's not within his
Yep.
purview right now. So it was very frustrating. So there are still times. Technology is
Yep.
amazing, and I'm lucky to live in this time
Yeah.
of this. But yeah, 10 years ago, and even now, technology can only take you so far.
Right. Do you want to explain a little bit more about what the blind kitchen is and what you do in there and what your services are and that kind of thing?
Sure. So the Blind Kitchen is online, and what we do is we offer adaptive culinary tools and strategies to people who want to cook safely and independently in their own kitchens.
Sure.
And so things like the talking thermometer, talking scale, we have a talking timer, because not everyone uses smart speakers for timers. I do,
Yep.
or Siri. Some people are much more comfortable with the hands-on.
Yep.
Those labels are available that I spoke to you about. We also have those work trays. We have adaptive measuring cups that have a system that you just count the stainless steel dots on the handle. So if it's a fourth of a teaspoon or a fourth of a cup, there's going to be 4 stainless steel dots that are part of the handle. So it's not Braille, it's just counting.
Right.
And we have, I think it's 95 tools in the kitchen right now that we sell. And our main customer base are people who already knew how to cook, but now because of age-related vision loss, don't have a clue how they can get back in the kitchen around the heat and the knives. And so if you go on the website, you can see there are videos where I tell what the tool is, why it's blind friendly, and how to use and care for it. And there's a lot of free stuff that people have access to, like how do you center a pan if you have a glass top stove? How do you know if your pan is centered or not? How do you brown meat? And all that information is free. And there are different techniques and strategies that help make that you can do it with confidence and you can do it safely.
So yeah, how do you figure out if the pan is centered on the burner?
Oh, good question. So basically the main tip that you need to know is when you can touch a hot pan on a hot stove with a fingertip, like around the rim of the edge, just tap it for a second and your finger will cool immediately. You can tell if it's hot or not, but then your finger cools immediately. You can't touch hot food. You can't touch hot water because that food will come back with your finger and continue to burn until it cools.
Sure.
But a clean rim of a pan, there you don't get burnt if you just tap it. So the bottom line is if I'm off center, let's say when I'm at the stove, I'm always touching it like at 2 o'clock, 4 o'clock, 7 o'clock, 10 o'clock. And if it's evenly hot all the way around, I know that the heat source is trapped underneath the pan. But let's say I'm stirring and I don't realize that I bumped it a little bit and I'm touching at the top. And now at 10 o'clock, it's much hotter than like at 6 o'clock or 2 o'clock. What that tells me is the heat is climbing the side of the pan. And so now I've got to nudge the pan back over that so that heat is once again underneath the pan. Can't tell as much. So in scientifically, probably if it's hot at 10 o'clock, then at 5 o'clock, it's probably getting cooler, but I can't tell.
Right.
My fingers aren't that sensitive. So it's finding the hot spot and then trying to cover it. And that, by the way, works over gas, same principle, or an electric coil stove.
How'd you figure that out? Just through trial and error, or just somebody tell you that?
You know, Aaron, I'm a teacher. And so when I was having to work at the Commission for the Blind, when I was doing it, I was like, how would I teach someone to do this? Because at first I didn't understand how to do it. It was like I was making a stir fry and it was awful. The pans got quiet. So that's how I knew it was off. It wasn't sizzling anymore. And so I just said, how can I do this? And I just trial and error. And I got it to work. Yeah. And now I teach it. And it's a very common question, what you just asked. A lot of people don't know how to do it.
So yeah, how do you
it's scary.
Yeah, another thing you kind of mentioned, like if you want to share it, how do you tell like if hamburger is brown and stuff?
So it's interesting. So you can use your talking thermometer. So it depends on the meat. If it's poultry, you've got to be very careful and have some way to assess the internal temperature.
Yep.
If it's hamburger, beef, it's a little different because people order medium rare steaks. It's not going to hurt you if it's under a certain degrees. But with browning meat, people are really afraid of that, and I'm not sure why, because but it's common, and I'm not putting people down because you can't use a meat thermometer for that for little crumbles.
Yep.
And even if you're doing turkey or chicken, the thing is, in our society, in our cuisine, I've never been served a dish of turkey crumbles, brown turkey crumbles.
Yep.
It's always going to go into a chili or a spaghetti sauce or tacos, so you're going to cook it further. Chances of you undercooking, you'd have to work at undercooking the turkey by the time you get through those dishes. So and the other big mistake people make is to use too high a heat. For most applications, it is not necessary. You just have to be able to hear a gentle sizzle, and you have to maintain that gentle sizzle. But most people are afraid that they're not going to cook it enough, so they overcook it. It's and that part's technique, and it's experience, and it's smell, and it's a hear a sizzle. I definitely use my other senses to be successful in this. There's no doubt.
That's very interesting. Wow, I'm learning so much. No, maybe I can actually cook some stuff. I can't cook brown meat. I mean, I don't know if I mean, I probably could figure it out, but I'm not sure I ever have. So now I have to try.
Well, the other thing they have now is that's helped me a lot is YouTube videos and the culinary that you can learn so much from
Yeah.
these cooks
Yep.
that are on there. The science of it that never
Yep.
used to be available to us. We had
Yep.
recipe books, Betty Crocker or Joy of Cooking. That nothing about the science. They just give you the time or the temperature and
Yep.
no reasons why. Now all that information is so available to any cook.
Yeah. That's great. What is one tip you can share to help our listeners be more inclusive today? So just something that people can start doing today to be more inclusive.
Huh, it's a good question. One is find ways to connect with people that seem to be outliers in that without pushing into it. Some people want to be outliers and they have to have that permission to do that. That's where they're comfortable. But I would say 90% of the people that are in a room of people, but they're by themselves, really would rather have someone connect with them. So find a way to say, hey, what are you doing here if you're there for a book club or if you're there for a cooking demonstration, do you cook? Just something that you have in common with that person while you're in that same space and find a safe way to connect with them. That's the easiest way to discover the humanness in people.
Yeah, that's great. Is there anything you want to talk about that we haven't discussed? I feel like we covered a lot of stuff.
I think we have. No, you're a very good interview. I've enjoyed it very
Thanks.
much. Goodness, you make it easy.
Where's the best place for everybody to connect with you?
So we're theblindkitchen.com
Okay.
is our website, and like I said, there's a lot of information in the library there on all different areas, things you've talked about: labeling, organizing, identifying things in closed containers, dining out, how to access and read recipes, cleaning, organizing, shopping. All those are different categories on the website. The another thing that would probably, if people are trying to cook with vision loss, is to sign up for our newsletter because we give a tool of the month. This is what
Sure.
we've added. We give a
Yep.
tip of the month, which would be something like how to center the pot on the stove. That was a tip of the month, and then
Good.
we give any activities that I'm doing. I do quite a few presentations and workshops, and
Okay.
so if people outsiders are able to attend, like I did Foundation Fighting Blindness, the Metro DC chapter Zoom presentation, and other people from all over the country were allowed
Okay.
just to register for it and be part of it and be able to interact with me. So
Yeah.
the other thing is to write to me at info@theblindkitchen.com, and I monitor that mailbox and respond to the emails.
Looking at your website, what are it looks like your logo is the letters TBK and then the Blind Kitchen underneath it, and what looks like to me like dominoes above it with certain circles colored in. What are those?
That's Braille.
That's
Those
Braille.
are the
Okay.
Braille letters. So a Braille
Okay.
cell has 6 cavities, like a large muffin pan. The jumbo muffins. Can you see it now?
Yeah.
There's 6,
Yep.
and so and then you have the little dot. So if you
Okay.
click on one of the videos, we actually won an award from the American Council of the Blind, their audio description project, because there is a person describing what those muffins are doing so that anybody, no matter what your vision is, knows what's happening on that screen.
Okay.
And the muffins are dancing around, and then they jump into the correct cups to form
Okay.
the letters TBK. So
Gotcha.
it's a very accessible website.
Awesome.
There's no pop-up ads. I don't have affiliates. It's just I keep it clean. I try to keep it as simple as I can because I struggle with technology, and I want to make it as easy as I can. And every item, the other thing, all the videos are audio described. And the other thing is that every item comes, like if you buy the work trays, they come in their own package and it's labeled both in large print and Braille. So you can go to the website and say, I don't remember what the auto measure spout did. And so you could find out what it's called, go to the website, and then watch the video that tells all the information you need to know it, to be able to use it.
Yeah, that's great. Ready for the last question?
I am.
So I'm holding up a can of Spam lunch meat. Do you like Spam lunch meat? Yes or no?
I do.
Well,
It's
that was
so
fast.
bad for me, but I love it.
Yeah, so I live in Austin, Minnesota, where they make Spam and where the Spam Museum is located. So I've been asking all my guests if they like Spam, just kind of a fun question. So
Yeah.
it's usually like that, where it's either super fast yes or super fast no. There's really not a lot of thinking about it.
Do you know what masubi is?
Is that
It's
like
like a
a
Hawaiian or Japanese
Spam thing?
it's a Spam thing. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
made
yeah.
with Spam
Yep,
and rice, and they have
yep.
molds.
Yeah, because like it's really big in Hawaii, so that may
Yeah,
yeah, I've seen that before. But yeah,
yeah,
so if
and
you
that
ever want to visit the Spam Museum, you have to come to Austin, Minnesota, where I live. So
I will do that. Well, the other thing is that musubi are very blind friendly because you make it in a mold.
okay, sure.
Everything's contained, and the Spam is the same size as the mold.
Yep. Okay. I
It's
got
kinda
it.
cool. Yeah, so you
Cool.
picked an accessible food. Thank you.
Nice. Yeah. Thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.
To those listening, thank you for allowing me to be part of your journey. It is truly an honor. Please join the podcast newsletter by clicking on the link in the episode description to keep up with the latest episode. Together, we can make the world more inclusive. Until next time, stay empowered and be a champion for inclusion.